Replace. This place tastes like dried fruit and dried skin, dusty hands and liquid trapped in the tight outlines of the leaves and jagged branches, jagged fingertips from the repetitive chafing against rocks, sandstone and granite, calluses and termite mounds, and the crevices, the valleys feel like mulchy, dripping, sodden cloth, dark and green and everlasting. With eyes transfixed on the undulating canopy and the swinging Tarzan vines, you sometimes feel an actor, playing part in your own life, preset to the script of movie scenes and what your parents valued, but you feel the rapture of a 5 or 6-year-old screaming in joy at running up the mountain, racing away under the lychee trees and sleeping heavy in the drooping bunk bed. This place feels like desert and magic and mountains and sudden ice bath ocean water streaming up the body, as if pressed against the tendons or the bones, as if melting against the heated water within your flesh, the tight outlines of your flesh moving, succulent. Now dipped into a wake-up call. And I know this isn't home, but as I crawl backwards to my starting line, past my childhood scripture, and to that spot where I can redefine my path, I take in the view and I know there will be no home, because it fades from me so easily with the distance. But for now, this place feels pretty good. Thanks. Thank you for having me at this event. It's so good to see everyone and hear everyone's performances. So this is my second poetry performance in my life. I very rarely share my poems, so this is terrifying and exciting. So I'm going to do a brief introduction before the other poems. This poem that I just read is called Replace, R-E place, as in regarding place. It was inspired by a hike on the weekend in Cape Town, and on the hike I worked through some pretty challenging thoughts and feelings about where I belong and where home is. So after that hike I got back and just the whole poem just came out in one go. So a lot of the poem is linked to the transient nature of my life so far and how place and home are concepts that I often find myself grappling with. So this next poem is one of my heaviest poems. It's based on an encounter that I had with someone who ended up telling me that they had killed someone and then spent some time in prison because of it. And when he told me this story, he was weeping and he broke down. And the experience threw me through a bit of a loop. So it felt like one of those moments when my ethics were really challenged, because this was a person who was my friend, but they had done something really unacceptable. So I kind of grieved the loss of the friendship. I felt angry at having been told this information. And so I was then dealing with these emotions for about a year. And at the end of that year, suddenly this poem emerged. And I was really grateful that this poem emerged, because it helped me settle the experience. So one thing I want to point out about this poem is that it moves from to make, to let, and then to help, which is significant because it felt like I went through phases as I was dealing with the emotions of that information. To make a killer cry. To make a killer cry is not that difficult. You just think about yourself when you look at them. You think of mirrors and mess and magnitudes of stars. You think of food and sleep, toilet breaks, prison bars are only physical manifestations of places you've known. Because for your whole life, you've been shown how to make a killer cry. And I'd recommend it. Tears shed in sobs comes from a depth you could never reach, and so to let a killer cry seeps of trust. From the same grounds where it was buried, you will know this honor, to be a rainbow. Once in a lifetime, really, yet while you hold them, trying to encapsulate them and experiencing their heaving, you will feel nothing and react with instinct. And this will be enough, but you will not know it, and so you will thrash and try to understand why we bleed from this boomerang life, and then in 1 year's time, they will try on multicolored for your sake, but you will have tinted every shade and refuse the face paint. You see, to make a killer cry will drown you slowly. It throws your world at you. It sets up a cascade and lets it break above your head, then finds what you've held onto. It makes sinking sands of water. And you will think of a mother and a daughter, because when you helped a killer cry, they reminded you of love. Okay, just to continue on the very depressing tones this is taken. This poem is pretty introspective, but apparently quite relatable. So I've read this to a couple of people, and they've all said this makes me think about myself and my own experience. So this is a space that I sometimes get into. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's grief or trauma. But typically writing helps me work through these things instead of being paralyzed by them or dodging them completely and just never addressing them. So this poem is about me in a deep writing mode. I also want to say that this poem is pre-Tipsy Days. She is like a ray of sunshine, so I wouldn't get away with getting into this space now, because she literally snaps at me if I sit for too long. Okay, so this is called Over the Course of 5 Full Days, and it's pretty hard for me to enunciate the word soliloquy, so bear with me. Over the course of 5 full days, I spent half my day running away and the other 2/4 living, writing and rewriting soliloquy in an imagined hay-stacked barnyard that bears little resemblance to my reality or even something desirable. But it feels breezy and soft to sit on, and my body no longer feels like it really should do anything, let alone act mildly harmonious. Because I spent eons in every conversation noticing the pieces of people coming together, and am inconsolable in the silence that oscillates around me. Time and again I push it back, but it somehow creeps atop my voice, which over the course of 5 full days only visits me in retrospect. It is in my head, I know, but half of life is lived on the outside, and I do not know how to get it out in time. I think it must be sort of intravenously peculiar to those around me who question, why don't you say something? They verbally or visually demand, please speak. And all of me wants to scream back, fucking Jesus Christ, Buddha, Muhammad Ali, grab it out of me then. I am weighted by this passenger, and it will not move. Universe, please no, it is not for lack of trying. But that is hardly acceptable, and the wisp of neediness in my thought line makes me nauseous, so I temporarily relinquish space to brevity, jot the face up down as running away, and return to write and rewrite my next soliloquy. Okay, I'm going to read 2 more poems. So this poem is about boundaries, romantic boundaries. So I had a recent entanglement with someone who suggested that boundaries don't make sense because in his mind there are no hard boundaries in nature. So that was his argument, which was a bit problematic because I literally study environmental science. And there are definitely boundaries that we should not cross. like planetary boundaries, tipping points. So to illustrate this, I use the geological formations of fissures and fractures in rock. And this signifies the status of our entanglement going forward. Fissures and fractures. There is a power in saying, "This is enough for me." As in, I am happy to uncover this one until I cannot uncover any more. Like buying a piece of clothing and wearing it until the fabric is stretched enough to fill the whole ecosystem, wear it out, and then recycle as something butterfly-like. It is a power in saying, I have seen enough to act now, seen enough to place me at this viewpoint and take a rest for a while. Take in the way in which the clouds do not stop moving when I do, see every sunshine strip slanted across the mountains, and then the haphazard grass around my feet. Raise again and notice every water source dripped across the landscape, and wonder how they got there, how they are contained, and how nothing really is. Wonder how you have spent so long forgetting that you are made of water, a bearer, what you have contained, and how nothing really is. And then ask yourself and those around you how this could be anything other than enough. And to answer that, we could reread our messages from start to finish as a sort of syllabus, repronouncing the intention behind every word, and the wisdom within it would swirl above our heads like a cloud of thought and speech bubble, back and forth. But now a sort of dragging extends from me out until the inevitable jump. You can, I promise. Back and forth, I promise. And when the puppy eyes in you jump out but look back at me, know that yes, I have been the bird before, and I can be the rock. And there are hard lines on earth, remember? They are needed, and they come in fissures and fractures, remember? So this is my last poem, and this is one of my most recent poems. It's called Dandelion. So I was working with a colleague on a climate change project, and I was just thinking about him actually, and thinking about what he does and what he was trained as. So he's a paleontologist in training, which I find really interesting, but I was considering the kind of work that he actually does every day, which is very different to anything paleontology related. And so those two things, his training and his current life, seem so in contrast with each other, but I found that juxtaposition quite beautiful. Dandelions. They sent dandelions up to the surface for a while, just so I could see them shining. They made astronomers of paleontologists, and only I could hear them crying. But when the world felt like Sunday night and the earth spun in roundabout, I could call out to the broken clocks to find a piece of comfort here, to find a piece of comfort now. Often here the empty streets look like catacombs of who we were, and the graves we're digging for ourselves seem inside out, and I'm so sure they won't be enough to make a touch on the corduroy pants they wore, or those magicians and their handiwork, the surfers in their half-wet suits, those strange dorm room chats, and oh, that pursuit, it won't be enough to hold the smooth poetic weight of sting, to hold the light and soul of jazz, to break out and dance along the hallway when we'll never taste the quench of watermelon again, smell eucalyptus or lavender. The graves will not be pet-sized, not depth or breadth or even lengthwise, but they sent dandelions up to the surface for a while just so I could see them shining. They made astronomers of paleontologists, and only I could hear them crying. When the world felt like Sunday night and the earth spun in roundabout, I could call out to the broken clocks to find a piece of comfort here, to find a piece of comfort now. Thanks.
Wow.